Yo, welcome to the QB School. I am JT O'Sullivan, fired up for the QB School show. You know, it's kind of like a little, I don't know, y'all, let me know how you feel, but I almost feel like I am like in a draft kind of hangover. You get excited about it. There's obviously nothing else going on sports-wise that you're kind of at this kind of peak that you have something to watch, and all of a sudden it's come and it's gone. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't watch a second of anything beyond the first round. So I'm going to kind of walk through this as we walk through it together. Okay, so I haven't really even looked. Probably many of y'all have probably already know this better than I do, but I'm going to try to see if I created a different screen for me to go over and just kind of quickly get a snapshot of what's going on with the other rounds. All right, so hopefully this thing turns over and looks correct to y'all. It might be a little small depending on what level you guys are on. But for me, the Jalen Hurts thing we need to talk about. The Jacob Eason we need to talk about. The James Morgan, I haven't watched one snap of him. So I don't know anything about him. Never seen him play. Obviously, Adam likes him in New York. It's a little bit of a weird situation with Sam Darnold. Jake Fromm, interesting pick from Buffalo. Jake, I wanted to watch from Oregon State and just didn't have any access to film of Oregon State of him playing. Cole McDonald did a video on. That's an interesting pick with the Titans. I don't know anything about DiNucci. I don't know anything about Stevens. And then Nate Stanley, I'm obviously a big fan of. And then, the elephant in the room for this channel is just Anthony Gordon not getting picked. So there's a bunch of different ways here that we can try to get through some of this. For me, let's start with the Jalen Hurts thing in Philadelphia. So Jalen Hurts to Philadelphia, to me, is an interesting kind of pick on a bunch of different levels. So I think that there is, the obvious issue right out the gate that Carson Wentz has proven that he cannot make it through many games back to back to back to back for whatever reason, whether it's the play style, his makeup, whatever it is, bad luck. There's a bunch of different variables that go into it. So it's in their best interest to have a young, long-term solution to when that doesn't happen. Now, the more interesting thing for me is not only, yes, he could be a very serviceable backup, but he's also got this element of change-up. What are they going to do when he comes on the field? Obviously, New Orleans is onto something with the Taysom Hill package in New Orleans. And if you're going to have a backup and potentially two backups, why not have a guy who can also create a package around so that it's not just this one-off backup like, if the wheels come off or if he gets hurt, we'll throw him out there. No, let's have this guy. He's part of the roster. I always wanted that as a backup. I would have loved. Now, I wasn't anywhere near the athletes that these guys are. But just a package to create different stretches on the defense. I really do think two quarterback formations, two quarterback personnel groups have the potential to at least be, something teams have to prepare for. It is something that I think is a differentiator if you have a guy who is that athletic, that dynamic, that he can come on and make plays like that. Now, I'm not sure if that's how they're going to use him, but I think that there's at least the potential for that. The next one, Jacob Eason. So I'm a huge Phillip Rivers fan, multiple levels. Great dude, outstanding, human being, great quarterback, in my opinion, Hall of Fame quarterback. Obviously awkward motion, always has been, but is just a fantastic dude and great guy to be around and learn from, whether you're his peer, whether you're his elder, whether you're, a young guy, whether you're his coach, whether you're his coordinator, head coach. He is that type of human being. And so really fortunate for Jacob Eason to go in there and have someone like Phillip Rivers to look up for, even if it's just for a year. Now, do I think he's anywhere near being able to play? And is he anything like Phillip? Phillip has unbelievable anticipation, like surreal anticipation. He's also got great touch. Now, does he make some decisions, when he feels like he's got to make a play that put his team kind of in harm's way sometimes? Absolutely. But I've never knocked him as much as that. I always felt like the majority of those times he was making risky throws like that, it was either built into the Norv Turner system, or he felt like he had to make a play to get his team back in it. It didn't work, and it just snowballed from there. So I think Jacob Eason fell into a great spot. I'm never surprised that those type of picks happen, just because so many organizations are tethered to the prototypical what a quarterback looks like. Big, tall, strong, white dude. And that's just the straight up truth. And so the idea that you're surprised that a guy who's a monster and has a cannon, goes before the guy that he beat out, to me is just a little bit naive. And that's just the reality of the, history of the league. They're looking for a prototypical guy. Yes, things might be changing a little bit. There might be a little evolution. You might see smaller guys, more dual threat guys, more athletic guys, but the history of the league is big, strong, tall dudes who look a certain way. And so you can never be surprised that they come off the board probably earlier than what their film says that they should, or what their history, their college trajectory has shown. And so, I think he's really fortunate to end up at Indianapolis. From there, James Morgan to the Jets, know nothing about him. Jake Fromm to Buffalo, for me, is it's an interesting pick on a few different levels. I think Buffalo is a really tough place to play quarterback. And I'm not talking about anything to do with the organization. I'm just talking about the weather. You got to be a dude who can rip it. I've been there less than 5 times. But I can't tell you I was ever there and felt like, oh, this is a day where I could pass for 400 yards. It was like, this is a day that I'm going to hand the ball off 40 times because it's howling. It's ridiculous cold. It's like slicing me cold. And that would be August, November, December. It was never nice. And I'm not trying to bash you if you live there. I'm sure it's nice every once in a while. But as far as spinning a football, you got to be a dude who can rip it. And I'm just not sure the fit of that for me is long-term. It doesn't align with what I think of when I think of Buffalo Bill quarterbacks. Now, Hope's probably there spinning the ball already and would be ready to go. But it was a strange thing for me. Cole McDonald to the Titans. Cole McDonald to the Titans for me, he kind of looks like Tannehill, big, strong, athletic guy. I mean, it's a similar, I think a lot of coaches and organizations have the mental model of what a quarterback should look like. What's our starter look like? Well, this guy looks like our starter. I bet he can do a lot of the same things. Let's just get this guy. And it's a simple jump. It's an easy bridge to what otherwise is like, as opposed to going out and getting a small lefty. This guy, he's obviously got some, in my opinion, throwing fundamental issues. But he's a big, strong, athletic guy. Ryan Tannehill probably had some fundamental throwing issues coming out of college too. And he had an unbelievable second half of this year. From there, the last one I want to talk about before we dive into kind of a more back and forth is Nate Stanley. Nate going to Minnesota is a really great fit, I think. I'm not necessarily a massive Gary Kubiak fan, but I do think in the same vein that Cole McDonald looks like Ryan Tannehill as far as the build-up, the mechanics, the body type. I think Nate Stanley has some, I'm not sure if he would like this, but he's got some Kirk Cousins, vibe about him, whether it's, decision-making, whether it's, pocket presence. There is an element of, I think Kirk has this like polished, make some throws that really are kind of like, wow, this guy is, obviously he's gotten paid multiple times, right? I honestly think that's an interesting comparable I hadn't thought about before the draft, that I could see the alignment again of what the starter looks like to what the backup looks like. That's why coming from, maybe I'm just slanted because I didn't look like any starters. So I'm always hypersensitive to guys, to organizations that get their backup to look like the starter, just because there is this kind of mental model that's an easy association. But I think that the Vikings and Zim it's a great organization to be part of if you're Nate Stanley going there to make a team. Now, the final thing I want to talk about, Anthony Gordon not being drafted, a guy that I probably thought should be drafted. Again, and this is unfortunate, and this is just the way that the league has operated and kind of still continues to operate in, is there is a stigma tethered to the air raid. There just is. That's the in my opinion, that's the reality of it. Whether guys in the league think that it is a gimmick, whether they think that the stats are inflated, whether they think that it's not transferable to the league. And I will be honest with you, from watching the film to not being an air raid guy, I do think that there are elements of the raid, and what I mean by that is more the quarterback footwork, so much so that the quarterback footwork isn't tethered all the time to the timing of the routes. So what I mean by that is in the league, the vast majority of teams are going to have a specific drop for a specific route. And you take a hitch and you let that thing rip if it's the right look. Where in the raid, I feel like it's more, there's a lot more green grass, a lot of read the wide receiver, a lot more kind of, it feels like you're waiting, and it just doesn't look like it translates to the league. And I'm not sure that that's right, wrong, or indifferent, but I can tell you that I've been around enough coaches, players, coordinators who say similar things that you just can't, it doesn't translate as far as you can say, yes, he's very accurate. Yes, he's got a quick release, but he's a system guy. Now, I know that people can make the argument that any quarterback is a system guy. And to a certain regard, that's true. But there is still this stigma for whatever reason. And I'm not sure that it's totally fair, to be honest with you, the more and more I learn about the air raid. But as far as this inflation of production. And so, I hope he lands where, in Seattle, where they give him an opportunity to do that.